Life, culture and current events from a biblical perspective. 2020 with Neil Johnson on Vision.
We are turning our attention once again today to Christian tracts. You know, those little documents, often glossy, a gospel message in there, intermingled with a story. Well, there's a new one especially prepared for this weekend's Newcastle 500 V8 Supercar races. Vince Wall is the man behind this, founder of His Word Media, also pastor of the Newcastle Baptist Tabernacle. Vince is back with us. Vince, welcome back to 2020.
Thank you, Neil.
Vince, need I ask, you must be a V8 Supercars fan.
No, not really. No, I used to have an old FJ Holden, but it never went the speed of the V8.
All right, well, your main passion is the gospel, so whether it's the Titanic, and we might come back to your Titanic tracks, but this one about V8 Supercars, what's the inspiration then for you?
Well, as you know, we're having the V8 Supercar races on the coast here at Newcastle, the edge of the city. And they're back again now. They were cancelled when COVID was on, and they're back again this year. And so I thought it'd be wonderful to have a tract to go out to the many racegoers that are coming here to Newcastle for this weekend.
Paint us a picture in our minds. What is this tract? What does it look like? You know, your front cover, is it as creative as some as your earlier ones?
Yes, well, it's got two cartoon pictures of some souped-up cars on it, and it's got "Welcome to the Race." That's the front cover of the track. And I've actually taken a photo of the Civic Hall here at Newcastle and then cartoonised that and put the cars in front of that.
Well, there's an awful lot of Christian believers who do like to watch the Bathurst 1000 or V8 Supercars, and of course in their new look, their new development level, there'll be a lot of people who'll be interested in this, and this creates an opportunity to break down some barriers, does it? When you're using a tract in a circumstance where you've got someone who's a passionate supporter of V8 Supercars, how would you use this tract?
Well, we're going to be going out on Friday night and we'll be going just to where the general public are, down there where they'll be gathering for the races and for restaurants and things like that. And we'll be dressed up in some race gear. My son has a little a motorbike, and I'm going to be borrowing his helmet, and then I'm going to get a race shirt, and so we'll be dressed for it, and we'll be handing these tracts out, which will be "Welcome to the Race." So we're assuming many people will take it that have come here for the races this weekend.
I think it is great. Your creativity is just outstanding, Vince, because some listeners will remember you and some of our conversations around Titanic evangelism, where you've been dressing as the captain of the Titanic, and you've got some of your supporters dressed as the crew. You've had a Titanic model. People have even been using it as a photo opportunity. But the idea of dressing up to hand out a tract, you're about to take that to a whole new level. Where did you get all the race gear from?
Well, as I say, I'm going to get the helmet from my son, and one of the fellows in the church has emailed me a shop where I can get some race shirts from, and so I've yet to buy them, but I've got a day or so to go and get them, and I'll buy a race shirt and get the helmet, and I'll be off to the races.
Okay, this is the first time then that you'll be dressed in car racing gear to hand out tracts on the street. Now, if that's going to give us an impression just how successful that's going to be, just take us back to your Titanic dress-ups, because that's been really effective, hasn't it?
Yes, and that ministry still continues to be effective. We were out just a couple of weeks ago, and we take our model Titanic out, and we set that up on a trolley, a removalist trolley, and we stand round that. And just the other week we had, there was a hen's party, a future bride, and I guess her ladies came along that were all out for a night at the restaurants, and they wanted a photograph with the sailors. And so we gladly gave them the photograph opportunity with our Titanic, and we had I think 2 sailors and myself, gave them that opportunity, and then we're able to give them tracts. So it just breaks down the barriers to giving tracts out. And if people say to us, what's this about? We'll tell them that we're Christians, and we'll tell them what church we go to. And it's just wonderful. It's just a wonderful way to give out tracts and to meet people and to get smiles on their faces, and also photographic opportunities.
I think it's so amusing, Vince. You're going to have to get your appreciation of V8 Supercars up to speed because you mentioned you're not necessarily a huge fan, but you're ready to take a risk and do something courageous. Some people are going to say, who is this imposter dressed up in race gear? I think you could probably have a bit of fun with that. I think you're expecting to.
Oh, yes, we'll have fun. Yeah, the other guys, I'm sure they'll come along with what they can put together. And, I think we're set for a fun night. Yeah, the tract actually, it actually starts off with the history of motoring in Australia. And I mentioned the first petrol-driven car that was produced in Australia, and that's how the tract starts off. It was called the Tract, and it was produced here early in the 1900s. And in those days, the Tract sold for £275. In contrast today, the V8 Supercars, they cost over $300,000 each, and the running costs for a supercar can be between $3 and $5 million. So that's how my tract starts out. And then it goes and talks about early racing, motor car racing in Australia. And then it talks about what it takes to be a successful race car driver. And I say in my track, it takes years of preparation and training, as well as physical stamina, speed, concentration, and a determination to win. And the track says every great race driver has the supreme goal of finishing well. And I continue, and it says motor racing is a team sport, even though the competitors may drive their cars alone. There's not one champion race car driver anywhere in the world that can honestly say that they finished their race all because of their own efforts. Every winning driver knows that without others supporting them, there would be no victory lap or prize at the end. And then I go in and I talk about life is a bit like a race, because all of us one day will make our final lap on the earth before we cross the finishing line into eternity. And finishing well in this life is extremely important for all of us to consider. Yeah, so that's how I lead into the gospel that way.
Leading into the gospel and an opportunity in your tracts for the person who's handing that tract out to be able to lead the person who receives that tract in a conversation that brings them into an encounter with Christ. That's a really powerful thing. Hey, and of course, as a Christian, we appreciate this, don't we? Because, running the race, keeping the faith, racing is something of a metaphor that we do use when we're talking about the Christian walk.
That's right, yes. And I continue on in the tract, and I say that, in regards to the Lord, I say some 2,000 years ago, Jesus Christ, who was God, visited this earth and completed the race of life with perfection. On his final day on earth, Jesus was placed on a cross at Calvary, shedding his blood as a payment for all our sins, then rising again from the grave. And then towards the end of the tract, I say, crossing the finish line from earth to heaven is simpler than most people think. And then it leads into the gospel. And the final verses I give is from Hebrews 12, let us run with patience the race that is set before us, looking unto Jesus, the author and finisher of our faith.
Well, I can hardly wait to hear how the props department in your neck of the woods is trying to get things up to speed, because I can just imagine you right now standing on the streets of Newcastle with a special prop. Not the Titanic this time, but someone's second-hand, perhaps a borrowed V8 supercar. Wouldn't that be fabulous?
Well, yes, that would be fabulous. I guess the closest thing I'm going to get is my son's helmet, but and a racing shirt, but we'll see how we go.
So starting with a helmet, you're going to get some race gear. and you're going to be handing out tracts, and those who are visiting Newcastle for the V8 Supercars event this weekend, you might just keep an eye out for Vince Wall. And for listeners, and of course this tract is useful not just for this race, but you've got all the other V8 Supercar races, and also for people who work in the automotive industry and have their own workshops. This is the sort of thing you could put in the hands of your local mechanic.
That's right. It actually doesn't mention the Newcastle races here. It does mention Bathurst, and it does mention Phillip Island. So it's a general sort of track. And so anyone could use this, whether it's at Bathurst, down at Phillip Island, a local mechanic, a local spares shop. Anyone could have this. It's quite compact and very easy for people to read, and the cartoon on the front's great.
And the amazing thing is, for listeners to our conversation today, they can get a hold of this tract for absolutely no charge. Free tracts. This is what you do, Vince. And you might like to have some people make a generous donation along the way, but if people need tracts, you'll provide them for free. Let me put listeners in contact with you. Vince is the founder of His Word Media. You can connect with Vince and you can make an order for free tracts to be able to hand out, because Vince wants to get the gospel into the hands of people. hiswordmedia.com. That's hiswordmedia.com. Vince, I'm looking forward to hearing how things go on your opportunities to hand these out at V8 Supercars events. This one coming up this weekend in Newcastle. But God's richest blessing on you. Thanks so much for updating us today on 2020.
Sure. I've got one final verse, and it's 1 Corinthians 9, verse 22. And part of it says, I made all things to all men, that I might by all means save some. So that's why we're going to dress up as race drivers.
I think you're fantastic, Vince. We'll talk again next time.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for taking time to listen to this audio on demand from Vision Christian Media. To find out more about us, go to vision.org.au.